Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about modifiers in 3ds Max. Unlike other 3D packages, modifiers in 3ds Max are a unique way of altering and modifying objects, as the name suggests. Modifiers can be used to do anything to an object, and it can range from texturing and UV mapping to animation and rigging to modeling and deforming objects. So the uses of modifiers are vast and wide. In our case, we want to use modifiers for polygon modeling. So you can think of it this way. Say you have a car and you take a sledgehammer and you swing it over your head as hard as you can, and you land that sledgehammer right smack in the middle of the hood of the car. What will happen is the sledgehammer is going to go ahead and put a nasty dent on the hood of that car and scratch the paint. You essentially modify the surface of the car. And you've also modified the anger of the owner of that car, whoever that might be. Well, in 3ds Max, modifiers can allow us to do that. We can make an object nice and smooth, or we can put dents in an object and make it look like an old crushed soda can. So it really depends on what we want to do. There's lots of modifiers available to us in 3ds Max, so let's go ahead and get started with that. Before we can modify an object with modifiers, we need an object. So let's go ahead and create a box. Okay, and it's a pretty dense box, so I'll just hit 2 on the keyboard to go quickly to the Modify tab, and I'm going to give this 1, 1, and 1 for segments in the length, width, and height. Okay, alright, so let's go ahead and let's drop some modifiers on this. We can start dropping modifiers as it is now, or we can convert it to an editable poly if we wanted to. Let me go ahead and just start dropping modifiers on top of this. So where can we get modifiers? There's 2 main ways to get modifiers. You can get them from the main menu. If we go up here to the main menu, we see we have a modifiers menu. If we go ahead and click on that, we're going to get ourselves a menu with different types of modifiers, and they're all categorized. So you can quickly see there's modifiers for doing cloth, hair and fur, for doing UV mapping. There's modifiers for converting objects to mesh, patch, or poly. We have animation modifiers, as you can see. We have modifiers for cameras. We have modifiers for deforming objects in different ways, in different forms. We also have modifier here for mesh editing, so we can use different mesh editing modifiers. And what we're going to do is we can also go over here. Start again, 3, 2, 1. And the second way that we can go ahead and select our modifiers is, let's select the object, and over here we have a modifier list, so it gives us quick access to modifiers. Now, they're not neatly categorized like in the main menu item, but once you get used to them, you'll actually find that getting modifiers can sometimes be a little bit quicker here, although sometimes I tend to use the main menu item as well, so it's really a preference. So you get 2 different ways of getting your modifiers. Use whichever way works best for you. Over here we have them categorized as selection modifiers, world space modifiers, and object space modifiers. Okay, so let's go down here to the object space modifiers, and let's get ourselves a tessellate modifier. And what that's going to do, it's going to tessellate our object, and in 3D, tessellate means that basically you break up the polygons into more little polygons. Okay, and with the tessellate modifier selected, we have different parameters. We can tell it to operate on triangles, which are these faces, or polygons, or 4-sided polygons. Okay, we can also tell it to place the polygons at edges or face center. So there's a tessellation there. I like to use edges here, and it creates these very nice, clean 4-sided polygons, or quadrangles, quads. Okay, we can drop this tension down, or we can increase it, whatever you want to do. I'll drop it down to make more of a square shape. We can also add iterations, and iterations controls the density of the tessellation. So we can tessellate this less 1 time or more twice. We can tessellate this 3 times or even up to 4 times to make ourselves a very dense box. I'm going to go ahead and use iterations to, well, I could use 3 or I could use 4. I'm going to use 4. Okay, I could tell it to update as well, but I'm going to leave those settings at default. Okay. Now I can drop another modifier on top of this. I can go to the modifier list here, and I can go ahead and drop, say, a noise modifier. Let's go down here, and they're all alphabetically ordered. So I'll go to noise, okay, and it creates this orange sort of helper object around your box. If I expand this, I get a gizmo and a center. I'm not going to go ahead and move any of those around, however. I'm just going to select the noise modifier, and we have a seed value here, which doesn't appear to make any change. That's because we have to go ahead and give this some strength. So let's give this some strength in the X, as well as the Y and the Z. And let's go ahead and take this scale here, and let's start to drop it down. As we drop it down, we can see that we start to really modify this object. If I zoom in here, we can see that now the object doesn't have these perfectly smooth sides. It now has this noise to it, sort of like these dents and these rough sides that don't look nice and smooth. So I can add more strength to this. So I can add strength in the X-axis, which you can see here from my move tool where it is. I can add more strength in the Y-axis. And I can add more strength in the Z-axis to give this some serious damage. So this can be an old brick or just a block of clay or something that has all these dents and imperfections into it. And this is great for when you're doing props for environments for, say, games or any type of realistic CG elements. This can create a pretty cool object for you to get started modeling here. Okay, I can turn on the fractal option here, add some roughness with the fractal. Well, maybe change the iterations, maybe change the scale of this. I can change the strength here. If the strength is a little bit too much, I could drop the strength, make him more subtle dents and imperfections here in the object. So you can see how modifiers can be used to go ahead and, as the name suggests, modify objects. And there's so many modifiers here that really the possibilities for the objects you can come up with are endless. Pretty much limited to your own imagination. Now, there are some very important notes that you need to be aware of when working with modifiers. As you can see in the modifier stack, which is this little window right here, we have the box at the bottom, we have the tessellate modifier, and then we have the noise modifier on top of that. The order of the modifier stack from the bottom up is very important because 3ds Max uses that order to evaluate the modifier. Okay? So right now 3ds Max is looking at this and it's evaluating this as like so. It sees the box first, then it sees the tessellate on top of the box, so the box gets tessellated, and then it's adding noise on top of the tessellated box. So it's very important that you understand that the evaluation of modifiers in the stack is relevant to what's happening in 3D Studio Max and is actually vital and extremely important. So that's how it works. It works from the bottom and it works its way up to the top. So the bottom gets evaluated first and whatever's on the top gets evaluated last. Another important note is that modifiers can be turned on and off, at least the visibility. Okay? So right here next to these modifiers, you notice that there's a little light bulb icon and it's turned on. If I click on it, I can turn a modifier off. So I could turn off all these modifiers. So now all you see is the box. The end result is just the box with no tessellation and no noise. Okay, it's the original object I started off with. If I just want to see what the noise looks like, I can just turn on noise. Okay, but it's not going to make much of a difference because the box is so primitive. It only has these 6 sides to it, making it pretty difficult to see the effect of the noise modifier. Okay, if I turn off the noise, all I see is the box with the tessellation, these nice smooth sides to it. You can't actually see the noise because the noise modifier has been turned off, so I can turn it back on again if I'm ready to view it. And one final note is this button down here. This button allows you to toggle on and off the ability to see the end result of, well, your entire modifier stack. So if I turn it off, what will happen is that if I select box, I won't see the final result of the modifier stack. I just see the box. If I select tessellate, I can see everything in the modifier stack up to tessellate. So I could see the box and I could see the tessellation. If I select the noise modifier, I can see the box, the tessellation, and the noise. Okay? So it's very important. If you always want to see the final result, you can turn this toggle back on. And now it doesn't matter if I select tessellate or box, I'm always going to see the final result, which is the noise on top of the tessellated box. So that's very important to understand. Okay, so modifiers, there you go. Simple enough, right? If you want to get rid of modifiers, you can right click on top of the modifier and you can hit delete. Or you can select the modifier in the modifier stack and hit this little trash can icon down here. Once you hit that trash can icon, the modifier you had selected will be deleted. And we're back to our original box with our original parameters over here. Okay, so that's going to do it for modifiers. Pretty powerful and pretty straightforward, simple way of making some changes and mass edits to your polygon objects. Okay, so I'm going to end this video here, and in the next one we're going to go ahead and move on here in 3D Studio Max.